250 heading 146.
Okay, do you have a good sight on the ash plume at this time?
Yeah, it's just cloudy. It could be ash. It's just a little browner than the normal cloud, we don't know. We have to go left now. It's smoky in the cockpit at the moment, sir.
KLM 867 Heavy, roger, left at your discretion.
Yeah, we fly on 390 in black cloud and the heading is 130.
A Boeing 747 was flying high over the wilderness of Alaska when suddenly all 4 engines failed at once. Smoke filled the cockpit. The pilots desperately tried to restart the engines as the aircraft began a rapid descent, the ground coming closer and closer. With 245 lives on board, the situation was critical. Could the flight crew restart the engines in time before the plane crashed into the mountains? Let's step into the story of KLM Royal Dutch Airlines Flight 867. On the morning of December 15, 1989, at 8:30 a.m., KLM Flight 867 departed from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, bound for Tokyo Narita Airport in Japan, with a scheduled refueling stop in Anchorage, Alaska. The aircraft used for this flight was Boeing's newest model at the time, the 747-400, the latest and most advanced version of the iconic jumbo jet in 1989. The Boeing 747-400 represented the pinnacle of aviation technology at the time. It featured a modern glass cockpit equipped with 6 multifunction displays that replaced the hundreds of analog gauges and switches found in older models. In addition, the role of the flight engineer had been eliminated. Its functions were now handled by automated systems, meaning the aircraft could be operated by just 2 pilots, a captain and a first officer. The captain of this flight was 51-year-old Carl van der Elst, a veteran pilot with over 13,000 flight hours. However, since the 747-400 was a brand new model, he had logged only about 100 hours of experience on this specific aircraft type. Also on board were 2 co-pilots, 27-year-old Mike Fisher and a younger officer in his 20s, Walter Wielinga. As the 747 flew north over the English Channel, a crisis was quietly developing deep underground thousands of miles away. In southern Alaska, the Redoubt volcano had erupted the day before the flight, spewing massive plumes of volcanic ash and smoke high into the atmosphere. Although the volcano had stopped erupting by the day of the flight, the crew had been briefed about the situation and warned to remain alert for a possible renewed eruption. The pilots understood well the dangers of volcanic ash. Just 7 years earlier, a British Airways 747 had flown into an ash cloud at night over Indonesia. All 4 engines failed, and while the crew miraculously restarted them, the aircraft lost several thousand feet during the descent, coming perilously close to crashing into the sea. As Flight 867 approached Anchorage, the crew received word that Redoubt Volcano had erupted again. They would now have to navigate carefully to avoid the ash clouds. Fortunately, it was daytime, so they could rely on visual observation, something impossible at night. The challenge, however, was that volcanic ash is invisible to weather radar, since radar detects moisture droplets, not fine, dry ash particles. After 11 hours of flight from Amsterdam, KLM Flight 867 began its descent toward Anchorage. Ahead lay a thick bank of clouds, and the pilots could not tell whether they were ordinary clouds or deadly volcanic ash. The Redoubt volcano was about 250 kilometers, 155 miles from Flight 867's position, yet neither the flight crew nor air traffic control had accurate data on where the volcanic ash clouds were drifting. As the aircraft descended through 26,000 feet, the first officer contacted Anchorage Air Traffic Control, but at that very moment, everything changed. The 747 suddenly entered a dense cloud, and within seconds, the cockpit filled with a sharp, acrid smell and smoke. The crew instantly realized they had flown straight into a volcanic ash cloud. The pilots put on their oxygen masks immediately. The captain pushed the throttles to full power, and the aircraft began to climb sharply, hoping to escape the ash cloud. But the crew didn't realize that this decision would make things far worse. As the aircraft passed through the ash, fine volcanic particles were sucked into all 4 engines. Inside, the extreme heat caused the ash to melt into molten glass-like slag. This sticky debris clogged the engines, choking off airflow. Without air, the engines could no longer burn fuel. Within moments, all 4 engines flamed out, one after another. The aircraft began a rapid descent. With no engine power, the electrical systems failed and the cockpit went dark. The instruments switched over to emergency backup power, but without thrust, the enormous Boeing 747 was now a 400-ton glider sliding downward toward the rugged mountains of Alaska. If the crew could not restart the engines, the aircraft would crash into the terrain below, and all 245 people on board would be lost. The captain handed control of the plane to the first officer, focusing all his attention on trying to restart the engines. Again and again he tried, but each attempt failed. The 747 continued to lose altitude rapidly, the dark shapes of the mountains growing closer beneath them. To make matters worse, on several occasions, the engines briefly restarted only to shut down again moments later. Each restart caused the aircraft's power source to switch from battery backup to engine generators, and every time the engines quit again, the entire cockpit went black for a few seconds. Those moments of total darkness led the crew to believe that even the emergency power system had failed. They were falling helplessly toward the mountains, completely in the dark, and running out of time. During the terrifying descent, the pilots lost several critical instruments, including their airspeed indicators. Then came another shock, a fire warning in the forward cargo compartment. In reality, it was a false alarm, but the crew had no way of knowing that at the time. A fire on board an aircraft is one of the most dangerous emergencies imaginable, and the chances of survival in such a situation are very low. For the 231 passengers on board, their once smooth and peaceful journey had now become a nightmare. They could hear the engine spool down, then feel themselves pushed forward as the aircraft began to fall. A thin sulfur smell filled the air, volcanic ash seeping into the cabin vents. The cabin grew dark and eerie, the thick ash outside blocking most of the sunlight. Inside the cockpit, the crew's only hope was to restart the engines and bring the instruments back to life. The captain had already tried 5 times to restart them, then a 6th time, a 7th time. By now, the aircraft had lost more than 10,000 feet of altitude, and time was running out. But as the engines had been shut down for several minutes, they had begun to cool. As the temperature dropped, the molten volcanic ash inside started to solidify and become brittle. Then, as strong airflow rushed back in, it blew away the hardened ash and glass-like residue clogging the engines. On the 8th attempt, the captain finally succeeded. The 2 left engines roared back to life. At that moment, the aircraft was descending through 13,000 feet. A Boeing 747 can sustain flight on 2 engines, but barely, especially over the rugged mountains of Alaska. With Anchorage still many miles away, the crew urgently needed all 4 engines. And then, at around 11,000 feet, the 3rd and 4th engines also came back to life, one after another. Now the aircraft had full power restored, and the crew could finally set course for Anchorage to make an emergency landing. Yet even with the engines running, the danger was far from over. The windshield had been severely sandblasted by the volcanic ash, its surface rough and opaque. The pilots could barely see anything ahead as they prepared to land. Guided by air traffic control, the crew gradually brought the aircraft toward Anchorage Airport and, at last, made a safe landing. These are the photos taken after landing during the inspection of KLM Flight 867 at Anchorage. When technicians examined the aircraft, they discovered that over 80 kilograms, about 175 pounds, of volcanic ash had accumulated inside the engines. The damage was severe. All 4 engines had to be replaced. In addition, the cockpit windshields and the leading edges of the wings were so badly abraded that they too required replacement. The total repair cost was estimated at $150 million USD. Despite the extensive damage, the aircraft was repaired and returned to service with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, continuing to fly for nearly 3 more decades until its retirement in 2018. Global lessons learned. In response to the threat that volcanic ash poses to aviation worldwide, the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, recommended the creation of volcanic ash advisory centers, VACs, across the globe. These centers would monitor ash clouds, track their movement, and issue timely warnings to aircraft in affected regions. By the late 1990s, a network of 9 VACs had been established, covering every major flight region in the world. They have since proven highly effective, preventing many aircraft from inadvertently entering volcanic ash clouds, and in events such as the 2011 Icelandic eruption, they provided crucial data that guided Europe's air traffic response. New flight procedures. In addition to improved monitoring, new operational guidelines were developed to instruct pilots on what to do if they accidentally enter a volcanic ash cloud. The recommendations include reducing engine thrust to idle, keeping engine temperature below 1100 degrees C, the melting point of silicates in volcanic ash. If the ash cannot melt, it won't stick to engine parts or block airflow. Executing an immediate 180-degree turn to exit the ash cloud as quickly as possible. Had these procedures existed and been followed at the time, the severity of the KLM Flight 867 incident might have been greatly reduced. Even so, the outcome was nothing short of miraculous. No one was injured, no one lost their life. Against all odds, KLM Flight 867 became a remarkable story of survival, a moment when skill, perseverance, and a measure of luck kept 245 souls alive above the frozen wilderness of Alaska.